Joseph J. Colombara, fireman first class. So we left Yokosuka and we made a little trip one day up to Yokohama. We went to Okinawa and back, and then we shaped a course for Shanghai, China. And we went up the Yangtze River. We tied next to a concrete barge named the USS Abnaki. And we were only there for a week or two, and it wasn't unusual to see bodies floating down the Yangtze River. And in fact, one floated by the jetty where we went on Liberty for 3 days. We left there and went to a town we call Tsingtao, China. The name is actually Qingdao now, and it's on the Wangpu River. And the Germans had been there before the Boxer Rebellion. They had built a brewery there. And we spent about 3 months there. And then one morning we set sail for Okinawa, and we were out about a day or so and had a fire. And we went back to see how much damage there was, and at that time the captain left the ship. And we got a new captain. We never knew why the old captain left the ship. But years later, when I organized a reunion for this ship, the very first reunion, he came, and he said that he had had a heart attack. And so anyways, we proceeded on to Okinawa, and we tied up there at Naha. And we towed targets for a cruiser, and then we took a floating dry dock in tow, ARD-3. And we was to tow it to Guam, and on the way we hit a typhoon, and we were in the typhoon for about 3 days, and we lost the tow. And when picking it back up, we had to get too close to get a line over, and we had a collision. We had 6 small holes in our port side. It damaged the gun tub up by the bridge, it damaged the rail, and it damaged our whaleboat. And so we got the tow back and proceeded on. In about 2 days before we got to Guam, another tug came out and took the tow from us and took it in and docked it. And then just before we was to go into port, a pilot came out, and we went into the dry dock, and they cranked the cradles back over the blocks, and we were sitting in the cradle, and they closed the rear doors and pumped all the water out, and we repaired what damage we had. And this was in Guam, and we spent Christmas there in 1946, and we was always craving for dairy products and so on. Somebody says there's a PX at Buckner Bay, so there's 4, me and Castro and Correo, and maybe another guy said, where is it at? And they said, go up that road. So we were going to walk to Buckner Bay. And we got up the road a ways, and an officer came down in a Jeep with a lady with him, and he says, that's where we were going. He says, it's closed on Sundays. So there was a Army PX there. We went there for a while, went back home. Years later, I saw that Buckner Bay was clear on the other side of the island. We would have never made it, I don't think. And so we were there for a while, and then we went up and visited Saipan for 2 or 3 days, and then Tinian 2 or 3 days. And then we shaped a course for Manus Island, which is down in, I think, the Admiralties, and was the second largest American naval repair base. And we went down there when we crossed the equator. The ship hove to, and it was turned over to what you call shellbacks, people who had already crossed the equator. And we were polywogs. So they initiated us into this, and first thing we did, had to go up to the bow and take off all of our clothes but our skivvy shorts, and then they slapped us all the way down to they had built a canvas tunnel type thing full of garbage they'd saved for 2 weeks, and we had to crawl through there while they whipped us, and then the other end we got hit with a fire hose. And then we went over to this sharp, fat, pudgy little guy. He is sitting on a stool, and we knelt down in front of him, and he grabbed us and rubbed us in his belly. Then he reached down and got a handful of graphite grease and smeared in our hair. Then we went next to the engineering officer, who was Davy Jones, I believe he was, and he declared us shellbacks. Then we took the ship into Manus Island, and we docked there, and there were 5 sections of a battleship dry dock. When put together, you could put a battleship in there, and we hooked them up to 5 Liberty ships and escorted them to Pearl Harbor. Well, we got to Pearl Harbor, and we tied up behind an aircraft carrier. I think it may have been the Princeton, and so we were there only a few weeks. And a lot of the guys went over and got tattoos, and I remember 2 guys that went over and got those little sprig of cherries, 2 cherries on one sprig, and then they didn't like it, so they went back over and had a red apple tattooed over that. But if you knew the story and you looked close, you could see the red cherries in the apple. So then we made a short trip to San Francisco and back, and then we went up to Bremerton, Washington. We went up to the Straits of Juan de Fuca and Puget Sound into the repair base, and I went on leave. And while I was gone, they removed the 50-ton propulsion motor from the rear end of the ship and took it over and worked it over and put it all back in, and it was all done while I was gone in a week's time. And what we had was the 4 900 horsepower diesel engines supplying that power, if I'm not repeating myself, to the 50-ton propulsion motor, which was like a big motor, like an oscillating fan, and to it was attached, the shaft was attached to that and went out through the shaft alley, and on the end of it was a screw. The screw was a power screw. The blades were very wide, and they must have been anywhere from 8 to 10 or 12 feet tall. So anyways, we did that there, and then we went on down to Hunters Point, San Francisco, and while we were down there, someone pumped the bilge back where the propulsion motor was and didn't get the valve shut for some reason, and water came back in and got the propulsion, the armature wet. And so inspection crew came aboard and told them what we had to do, and from there we went on down to Terminal Island. And at that point I was discharged, and a friend of mine on there, Castro, sent me a newspaper article that they had to take that motor back out of there, and it was the largest one ever taken out at Terminal Island. And Castro and I, we corresponded for a few years, and then we stopped. And the unique thing about it that I've always thought about was my 2 best Liberty buddies. One was Lloyd Castro from Cucamonga, California, and the other one was Jimmy Carrillo, my paisano from Brooklyn, New York. And I was in Illinois, right in the middle of the country.